Is there anything any of us want to say before we start our conversation?
Nah, I like it raw.
Get out there. I know you do. I know you do.
You better buckle up, Buttercup, because I'm a little bit different than your other guests.
Good.
Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, glassblower. Join our conversations with professional working artists.
Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Here we are in week 2 of the new year, so Happy New Year still applies to everybody. You'll recognize another voice in the room here with Douglas and I.
Yeah, that's right. We're starting right off at the get-go with inviting our guest right up front here. So this is a new thing for us.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and welcome Randy or Cammy. Let's introduce yourself. How about that?
Sounds great. I'm really honored to be on the show. I listen to you guys constantly, especially while I'm driving all over the country. It's really amazing to have people who get my situation. Anyway, so I am Cammy Rahore, which started out as a drag name. So it's Cam Rahore. Everything about drag is fun, it turns out.
And you take photographs, right?
I am a photographer, yes.
There you go.
And so I am the artist formerly and still on the road known as Randy Thomae.
All right.
I'm actually a trans artivist now, where my new work is dedicated to saving trans lives. And the work that I tour with that you saw is landscape photography that are abstracts that I made quite a while ago at this point.
And we met back in La Quinta just a couple months ago.
Yeah, we ran into each other there.
So I'd never done La Quinta. I'm an East Coast guy, and I've been wanting to do the show forever. And I'm pushing my first load into the park, this beautiful setting, and I look up, and there's this. I've never asked a guest this before, but how big a human are you? You're pretty tall, right? You're coming in at you're over 6 feet.
I'm going to stand back. I'm going to stand back so you guys can see me right now.
Yeah,
I'm going to stand way back because I'm 6'7" right now.
Okay, there you go.
See, this is what I saw.
So I don't know if you can see, but these are 6-inch platforms.
All right.
You were on platforms on a ladder. Your booth is tall. You've got legs up to here. It's like, I'm just going to go right up to this human and say, hey, come on the podcast, just based on these platform shoes. But then as it's kind of getting on and we're into the show and you are holding court over near my booth and the artists are coming over and it's just flies to honey, baby. It is just on and you are holding court. I mean, you have 8-10 artists eating out of the palm of your hand. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is happening. We got to get this person on the podcast. So welcome. We're happy to have you.
Very happy.
Yeah, I was so thrilled. A lot of times now, the way my life works, my whole life I was swimming upstream. Mm. And it's like all of a sudden I could see, wait a second, the current goes the other way.
Yeah.
And now that I go downstream, things like this just fall into place.
Nice.
It's like I'm in the right place, right time.
Well, when we first met, you talked about how the past few years have been a radical realignment for you. So can we start there? Can we talk about that transformation you've been going through?
100%. So I introduced the work that I'm traveling with now, The Fragile Nature of Hope, in Ann Arbor, Michigan in July of 21. And before that time, I'd never done national shows. I was a Colorado artist. I hit the road really hard. So the first year I drove 40,000 miles. In 2022 at 189 hotel nights. Basically, I can't do filler shows because my work is 8 feet wide and I need people who can buy my work and have big spaces. And so I have to drive a lot to do a few shows.
You're shooting for those big fish.
Yeah, so a show for me, I'm trying to make 3 sales and get 400 no's, typically, in a normal show. So it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So when I first started touring, initially I felt like I was kind of pretending who I was in the booth. And that kind of developed into this really unique personal style, like wearing ascots and things. And then I turned into, as soon as I would roll out of the driveway, which was a lot of the time, I would be pretending who I was. And then it started to be when I wasn't on the road, I would get really sick. And I started thinking I was allergic to my house. Maybe I had mold or something.
Oh, really?
And then after about a year and a half of all this, it started to kind of come to a head. All of a sudden, I kind of had a bunch of realizations kind of gel for me. The first was I was an extreme extrovert, off the chart, which most of my life I've been alone. So that was kind of shocking to learn. But the most important thing that I realized was that the person in the booth was actually who I am, was my best self. And I've been pretending my whole life who I was.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So is this
it was
kind of
a
like
mind fuck.
you're playing a character almost, like when you get out there on the road? I mean, because a lot of us kind of do that
at first, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what we all do, right?
Mm-hmm.
You kind of develop a persona, which is you slip into this comfortable, right? Like when you're in your booth.
Jumping back to like our talk with Dole and Gaiman, I mean, he kind of puts on cool clothes that make him feel comfortable, and it's a similar type of thing, right? I mean, he's kind of like, I'm not happy unless I've got my cowboy hat on, and he's legit, but it's also kind of like he's like a hidden introvert. I think I can be okay, putting words in his mouth, but it's like I've got to put on this character in order to be comfortable.
That's how it started for me, right? And so that's what I meant.
That surprised you that you were an extrovert? Like you didn't realize that was kind of like a discovery of who you are?
It was shocking. Shocking. Yeah, and so for me, it's like a nuclear power source when I'm around people.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane. I've got massive health challenges. I've got chronic fatigue syndrome, which means I should never be able to even get off my couch. And I can go clubbing until 2 a.m, multiple times a week. No problem. Because there's thousands of people around me.
Okay.
And so for me, it's just like this insane power source.
Yeah. Picking up on that energy. Is that the same type of thing for shows? Can you do the same thing, or do you get done with a show and just, you're sapped?
When I'm with people, then it's like that power source, right?
Nice.
It is challenging to do my life. But it's, I'm grateful for it because it's how I became an artist. And my work is fundamentally all about finding joy through darkness, which I call hope. And so I think that's kind of a universal human condition, is that everyone struggles with things. And so for each person, it's a significant struggle, no matter, what the scale is compared to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think everyone can kind of fundamentally on a human level relate to my work that way, that it's about darkness and light and finding joy. So actually a lot of people walk into my booth and will just start crying without me saying anything.
Wow.
Which is powerful.
Yeah. Hey, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your work and how you got into it?
I'm in Colorado. My kids started skiing at 1. And I got them into ski racing really early. And I got a camera to take pictures of them ski racing. And I would stay in my ski coat all summer long, right? And then I would get on the hill, I would put my hands in my pockets, like, oh yeah, I take pictures. And then at some point, I realized, let me take it on a hike. And from that point on, I was like shooting every single day. I was that parent who's too into stuff and ruins it for the kid. That was me. And so I ruined it for Allie, which is my eternal, regret.
Yeah.
Because she was incredible at it. So anyway, so she retired and I was devastated. This was our life. I mean, she had like 120 days on snow that year.
Wow.
So I was thinking, well, how could I take this thing that's turned into this giant negative and make it a positive? Like, what would be the opposite of this? And I was thinking, well, the kind of biggest realization of this would be if I could actually shoot the World Cup on course.
Oh, wow.
And
like, what ages are we talking about as far as World Cup of? No.
World Cup is it. So that's the top level. So that's, internationally famous ski racers.
Right.
The World Cup travels around the world and they're, on venues all around the world, and they do the downhill stuff in the Olympics, all that stuff. And now the thing about ski racing is it's very dangerous. The photographer can die and it can kill the skier. And so it's really hard to get onto the course. Like the speed events, they have what's called A-net and B-net. A-net is so that an unconscious body bouncing down the course at 90 miles an hour can't go into the trees. So like you bounce into the net and get thrown back on the ground.
Yeah.
That's how dangerous it is, right? And the airbags are like 10 feet, 20 feet deep.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how big an airbag you need in case the skier runs into where you're positioned, right?
Yeah.
It's intense.
Yeah.
Which I'm very intense, so it's perfect for me. So anyway, I put together a portfolio from my, U14 girls, sent to the World Cup, and they're like, yeah, we'd like to take a look. So I went up and met with Francois Bompard, who is the photo chief. The photo chief is responsible to make sure photographers don't die or kill people. So I met with him. I ended up shooting the World Cup.
That's incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was incredible. But anyway, so that's how I started with photography.
When you get a permit for something like that, do you then have the right to...
It's a pass.
A pass, okay. But then you have the right to sell those photos. That's how you make a living.
100%.
That's how you make money. So it's not like you have a contract with a magazine. You go in, okay, now you get to go sell them.
Well, okay, so yes. So if I wasn't an American, I would just be doing that now. In Europe, they're insane about sports.
Mm-hmm.
And so World Cup. And so most of the photographers are either with like the AP and Getty, who are covering it for all the news organizations. And so for me, I'm an American, not working for Getty or AP. And so I was, hustling like we do, right? So I ended up selling those pictures to Ski Magazine, which paid for the trip.
So is the nature of like discovering your work, because your work is impressionist abstract photographs. So with shooting the skiers, was that kind of like a surprise that you were getting that effect from the speed of the racers going by you and trying to capture their images?
Yeah, it's really interesting because most fine artists don't start with ski racing, right? Or even sports photography. And so it really gave me a very different perspective. I see the world through little vignettes because my favorite lens is a 100 to 400 lens.
Okay.
So it's like looking through a telescope all the time. And so the way that I see involves that usually. My favorite lens is a long lens. I had to take hundreds of thousands of photos. The volume of photos in ski racing is massive. So if you're going fast, it doesn't matter what the speed, but let's say downhill, it's easier to understand, like 90 miles an hour. But like a normal shutter speed for ski racing would be a 2,000th of a second. So if I shoot you at 2,000th of a second, it doesn't matter how fast you're going, it will be in focus and crisp and clean. Now, the thing is, though, it's stop motion. So it doesn't really communicate how fast you're going at all. Like you're just frozen on the side of the mountain, right? You have no idea if they're going 15 miles an hour or 90 miles an hour.
Okay.
But if I can match my camera speed to your speed exactly, then I can use any shutter speed I want. So for panning in ski racing, you would use a 30th of a second. Okay. So you can imagine it's very difficult. So you went from 2,000th of a second to a 30th of a second, right? It's almost 100 times slower. So you have to exactly match their speed. So as they're going by, you are, and it's hard because you're in a parabola, right? And they're going straight. And so that's kind of the great skill that you learn. So anyway, I learned that. And that affects my drag work now, is I do panning shots.
So this is how you got started as far as photography goes, but then tell us a little bit about how you got into the body of work that got you into the art show circuit. Onto the hamster wheel, the grind.
Yeah, totally. In the summers, I started shooting landscapes. Initially, I was doing what I called emotional landscapes, and people just didn't get it. And then one day, by accident, I took my first abstract photo. So when you shoot foliage in Colorado, it's a little bit, I'm from New England, so foliage there is every color. In Colorado, it's yellow and maybe occasionally an orange or red.
Right.
And so it's a lot harder to get really awesome foliage in Colorado than it is in New England. It's just a different sport.
It's also, I mean, on a jury, it's also kind of a cliche. You can do the fallen the leaves in a puddle is like, oh my God.
Yeah, like how many different shots of yellow aspens can you make, right? So anyway, I was a good landscape photographer, and so like a well-behaved landscape photographer, and so I knew during foliage my responsibility to go shooting every day. Colorado has massive elevation changes and weather changes. So I had hiked into a location called Caribou Ranch in Nederland, Colorado. They recorded a bunch of famous albums in the 70s there. So some super rich person bought this massive spread of land. And then I think when they passed away, they donated to Boulder.
I have a painting in that place.
Oh, is that right?
I do, yeah. He bought a big painting from me. There was a triptych that he bought from in Cherry Creek that I'm a big music nerd and had just geeked out about, and that's the name of an Elton John record that I love too. So Caribou Ranch. So anyway, sorry, I just had a connection. Had to throw that in there.
No, you're awesome. So the thing is, like, you got to hike in about 2 miles, and during foliage season in Colorado, you learn, especially when you start shooting it and you try to make a good picture, there's like a peak hour to foliage in each location. It's different at each spot because of the radical elevation changes, and each valley has its own weather. So anyway, I hike in, and I carry a lot of gear because the way I do my work is insane. And so I get there, and the leaves have already fallen. And I'm like, oh, man, I'm already here, right? I totally blew it. And so I set up my stuff and took some pictures, and then I left. And then, foliage season, I'm shooting so many images, so many days. I didn't even look at those pictures for a while because I knew that day I screwed up. Leaves weren't on the trees. And so much later, I'm on my computer and I come across this image and I'm like, whoa, what the fuck is that? And I loved it, but I had no idea how it could be on my camera. So I boxed up all my stuff. I sent to Sony and I said, hey, it's broken. I'm in this pro support program, so you can do that. They checked it out. They sent it back like 2 days later. And he said, it's 100% to specification. So I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, how the hell could this happen? So I spent 6 months shooting full time, trying to do it again.
Okay.
And then something amazing happened. Yeah, do you have a question?
Oh, yeah. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to pull up the image that he's talking. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
That is
Storm
really
off in a
something
huff.
I am afraid about is saying wrong words. I don't mean them that way. It is just very, it's hard.
Let's talk about this. This is a really important thing that all people deal with. It's hard to understand trans, even for people who are trans. And I think people, especially people whose heart is in the right place, it makes you really nervous. You don't want to hurt their feelings by accident, right?
Right.
And so the important thing to understand is that trans people, like if we look at the news and stuff, it seems like everyone hates us. And so you just self-correcting shows so much care.
Okay.
So that more than undoes the negative of misgendering someone. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
To indicate that you understand that it's important. So, we talk to so many thousands of people across the country. And so I try to take each person I talk to and leave them a little bit better for the next trans person they encounter. And so I have two little tiny things to prepare anyone to encounter a trans person in the future.
Okay.
That kind of makes it exciting instead of scary.
I'm excited about this. Thank you for doing this. And we didn't really set it up. I should have asked this at the very beginning, but what are your pronouns?
Well, and here's the thing that's mind-blowing. It never ceases to amaze me how good it feels to be asked that.
Okay.
Like, I would never think of it until it happens. And every time it's like, wow, that just feels so amazing.
Okay.
So thank you for asking. My pronouns are she, they.
Okay.
So those are the pronouns that I use.
My 20-year-old actually had a conversation with me that us Gen Xers, we do assign gender just because, I don't know, that's just been the way history has been. My daughter says it is very presumptuous, no matter how somebody presents themselves, to assume.
And I've also talked to other people who are like, cisgendered straight folks. They get insulted. We're like, isn't it obvious? I'm a fucking man. Look at me. And then they get insulted, whereas it's like, okay, talking to you kind of breaks down some of these walls and maybe we can educate a little bit on why that's not.
And good news, I'm tough as fuck.
Great. Good deal.
Okay, so I like to make a safe space. So don't treat a person you don't know who may be trans the way that you can treat me, but I like to make a safe space for everyone to ask anything they want without worrying about hurting my feelings. My feelings are not hurtable. So ask away anything you want as we're going forward.
I feel like
I would love to help. And in fact, any artists out there, if there are artists who are curious and you see me at a show and I'm not with a customer, I love to help people understand and communicate with people and give you, a good role model of what a trans person can be like. So I'd like to send that to anyone listening.
That's really, really generous of you. I don't know that I necessarily, I do have people come up and just asking about show stuff just because of the position that Douglas and I have with the show. Mm-hmm. And I try to be super generous, but that's really, really generous of your time. And
well, my life is about saving trans lives. And so anyone who's curious that I can provide information, that's going to help so many other trans people, the amount of leverage. And so I'm doing it selfishly.
That's amazing. It's like,
if you
travel is the cure for racism, and maybe we can be the
100%.
cure for some of the transphobia and things that exist even in our own community, which I feel like is pretty damn open.
This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
Well, here we are on season 4 of the Independent Artist Podcast. And we want to say thank you to Zap for sponsoring our little podcast that could.
Douglas, when we took this podcast on, it started out as a replacement for the NAIA's newsletter and quickly morphed into something else.
It sure has. It's turned into a place where we can share our experiences and give voice to the professional working artist.
When we first took this project on, it was a pretty small potatoes kind of thing. And as it has grown some serious expenses. So thank you to Zap for helping us take a lot of those on and get these voices heard.
Thank you, Zap, for your support of this show and for the support of the artist community.
We should come back to that because I've got a story about that exact thing that I want to share that I was so shocked at.
No time like the present. Let's tell the story right now.
So I was in Breckenridge at a show. There was an artist we started talking, and I just assume the best of everyone all the time. Like I don't even,
Right.
Go into it. Whereas I'm in some trans support groups and I get a lot out of it, but I also really like to reflect back all the positive vibes that I get being trans, because the trans experience can be really, really bleak, really hard. Anyway, I just assume the best, but most trans people, because of the politics and everything you hear, when you turn on anything, assume the worst. And rightly so. You have to be careful you're not going to die, like get hurt, because there's so much violence against trans people. So I was like, it took me a second to realize that this person was transphobic, because they're an artist, I'm so used to having everything in common with artists at the shows that it caught me off guard. And so they said, well, when I meet a trans person, I have to assume they're probably a pedophile.
Oh my
and I was like,
gosh.
what? And he's like, and I'm like, well, why? And he's like, well, I saw a video once on YouTube. And I said, do you want to listen to what you just said? Like, are you comfortable with putting that out there? You saw one video once on YouTube. You don't even know what it was. And now you think everyone you meet might be a pedophile. So now that I'm trans, I'm always riding that line of how authentic I can be, because I need to make sales. This is how I make a living.
Right.
And so the insidious thing about bigotry is that you're never 100%, right? You can't be sure that you got passed over because of this, or you didn't make a sale because of that, especially with my numbers where I have to make 3 sales and get 400 no's. So if I make 2 sales, that's problematic. If I make 1 sale, that's a big problem. If I make 0, it's a disaster. And so I was talking about that with the artist. And so this person, in the same sentence as telling me I was probably a pedophile, said it was ridiculous to think that could be affecting my sales.
What the hell?
Like, if you think I'm a pedophile, why would you ever buy art from me?
Right. So they basically outed their flawed argument right there, right? I mean, They shared inherent bias right up front and then couldn't believe that inherent bias actually happens. So that was the irony of the whole thing.
Or that it makes a difference.
Right.
Right, that there's any impact of that. Right.
And on top of that, you have to spend so much of your life, I'm assuming, hypervigilant against bigotry and being safe.
Oh, yeah, and I've got stories about that, like in Utah, like Salt Lake City, I almost got jumped. So, but out of that came this incredibly beautiful experience with the Salt Lake City police force. I'm in a very unique situation. My life is very unique, which hopefully we can communicate to people, where I've gotten so much positive reinforcement that it kept pushing me to be more and more authentic. Now, Cammy Rahore is this surreal adventure that my internals can't even catch up to, because it's so wild. Like, I'm becoming like an icon. So that's really hard to wrap your brain around. Like, if that happens overnight and then just accelerates, it's accelerating.
Is that kind of your goal too? Is that kind of your goal to become kind of an icon?
Well, yeah. So in the service of my real goal is saving trans lives. Okay. The way I conceive of the new work, and this is the highest purpose, I think, of visual arts, is that at the highest level, you're creating work that will be seen by millions of people, and they can't unsee stuff that comes in their eyes. So you don't get to pick, right? You don't get to filter and say, do I want to see that? No, I didn't want to see that. Once it's in there, it's in there.
Right.
And so I'm making a visual virus that goes in through your eye holes and infects you with love and understanding for trans people. And so I need millions of people to see that. It's not as commercially successful. Like, if you come to a show and you walk within, like, I don't know, a couple hundred yards of my booth, you're going to see my work. And if you've got multiple big walls and lots of money, there's a pretty good chance if you talk to me, you're going to buy one of my pieces.
Right.
Like, everyone likes it. It's not offensive in any way, right? They're landscapes. They would be awesome in corporate lobbies. They're, very commercially appealing, my current work that I travel with. The new work, not so much. And so the only way I can figure out to make the new work is for Cammy to kind of blow up and become this icon. There's a tremendous amount of gatekeeping, because I'm trying to now become a blue chip artist. And in the fine art world, even like women artists, it's still a huge thing, like the bias against just being a cis female. So imagine a trans artist. There are a few, but it's like a handful of internationally famous trans artists. A handful, and probably not that many more famous women artists,
right?
Which is insane.
What do you think the path is to become that kind of iconic, or to become that icon?
It's just happening.
Is that kind of
it's just happening.
Do you feel like there's a place for that at art shows to be that and to sell the work and to represent and to place your pieces, or are you going to have to find, go the museum route and gallery route, where you have an interpretation, somebody else, a gallery owner or a worker can interpret you to the crowd? I mean, I myself, after having sold in some galleries, find it to be pretty interesting. The interpretation of me as an artist is a lot cooler than I am in person. And it's like you go into the gallery and you're like, oh my God, here comes Will Armstrong. I'm like,
okay, so my work has always been hard to sell.
Yeah.
I love explaining my work, and I think that's a strong aspect of me as an artist is I'm an experience, and also my work's very unique, and I'm the best suited to explain it because it's so unique. But the path that I'm looking at is I would like to hang at Art Basel in Miami. Mm-hmm. I think that is where I need to be. And Frieze and Paris Photo and that level of international art fair. People at that level don't even know that we exist. Mm-hmm. So there is a huge disconnect between our art world and the fine art world.
We're pretty middle class. I mean, this is a very middle class way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. We're middle class artists, which offends us, right? I mean, it's our life's work. It's offensive.
I like it, but yeah.
But it's like being hipsters. We're hipsters.
Well, there is
not wearing shoes and like living in Detroit and working on bikes or something.
Well, there is an element of high-end fine art where the artist persona, the ego, the whatever, that character that they are, that's the essence of the work. I mean, the work is desired and whatever, but then behind that is usually that big persona. And that seems to be what you're stepping into with your radical transformation that you've been experiencing recently.
So I've been touring for almost 2 years, and I had realized that I've been pretending my whole life who I was, and that the person that was in the booth was actually my best self. I'd heard about Art Basel. I'd known about it for a long time. And I was like, well, let me just go to Miami Art Week and just see what it's all about, just so I understand, like, where's the end point, right, that any artist could hope to be. And so I planned this trip, and I was thinking, well, just as an experiment, what if I tried being, because I only lived my best self while working in my booth. But I was like, well, what if I just pretended I was in my booth for the whole week, just to see what it was like to be this person, this persona that we pretend to be in the booth. I ended up having the best week of my life, by far.
That's incredible.
It was incredible, and it was surreal, and that's where this jumping off came when I split from reality.
When you showed up there, did you go full character? I mean, did you go full Cammy?
Well, so Cammy didn't exist yet.
Okay.
And I didn't know I was trans.
How fabulous were you is what I'm trying to get at that. Like,
So yeah, great question. Let's check in because it's like a graph.
Yeah.
At this point, I just had a very unique masculine style that people were flipping out about, but it was not, compared to where I am now, it was a 2 out of 10. Where now, like when I go out, I'm like at a 9. Like at Art Basel, I was at a 9. It was insane. I was being photographed for a fashion blog from Brazil on the style of Art Basel.
That's awesome.
So that was my first day of the first week that I was being my best self.
Yeah.
That reaction that you got was an indicator that you had stepped into your authentic self. The fact that people were attracted by what you were putting out there meant that you were in sync with that inner side of yourself.
I'm really glad that you brought that up. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around how this is working and why it's happening. And I think authenticity is so important to this whole thing. And I think there's like this really bizarre thing that we can get into where I just have this insane, like super deep connection with people instantly, where we're connecting on such a human level. And even people who I don't talk to, they just see me. And by seeing me, it changes them. I mean, it's kind of like waking up in a movie. I'm in wonder and awe about it. Like, how the fuck is this happening?
It's a really good feeling when, you're on the right path or you're being your authentic self. I think of that with the podcast, for example. There'll be times that Will and I are just up to our eyeballs with so much going on, and somebody will walk in at a show and tell us how important this is for them to hear the experiences from other artists and what that means to them. So I could see that in your situation, it might be very similar for maybe those people who, are trans, maybe need a trans role model.
It's 100%. And you guys have helped me that way so many times as I'm driving all over the freaking country for so much fucking time, listening to you guys on podcast.
That's sweet. It's
a big country.
It is a big country. And there's, our community, it's interesting to run across. There's thousands of artists out there that we could talk to. And, we love getting that connection with different voices. And that's why we wanted to have you on. Yeah. Okay. You have this body of work that's abstract photography that translates to big homes and to the rich folks, and that's your bread and butter that can get you. But your honest body of work that you really want to get out there now, and it's still abstract, but it's more telling stories about trans lives and some of the drag shows. And can I say it's just a drag show, right? Can I say that?
Yeah. So I'm shooting live drag. So I'm at a drag show.
Yeah.
I'm in the audience as like everyone else, and I'm in drag. So I'm shooting live drag in drag to save trans lives. So that's kind of the highest level explanation of the new work.
And this body of work has not been released yet, right? It's still
exactly.
So nobody can find it at this point.
Is it a matter of the work not being ready, or you not being ready to show it, or is it like a courage thing? Are you building yourself up because you seem like you've got all of the absolute courage in the world?
Yeah, I'm fearless. I'm threading a needle with the launch of this work. My current work is very commercially viable. In fact, I'm in a really hot area of Denver. It's really cool. It's called Rhino.
Oh,
it's this arts district.
Cool.
There's 10 brand new buildings within a block of me.
Amazing.
And they all could use my work. They could use my current league touring work because they're landscapes. They're not offensive to anyone. With the new work, it's not commercially appealing to most people. And so this is the purpose of the fine art world. If Instagram had been around forever, then we would not have Picasso. We wouldn't have Cubism. We wouldn't have all of the major advances in art.
Right.
Where people at the time were like, what the fuck is wrong with that guy? Or woman, right? Although mostly in history, it's been guys that got recognized. Do you see what I'm saying? And so that's where the fine art world steps in. It's like the Guggenheim is like, hey, this is art and people need to see it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people need to see it. And so the Guggenheim makes a statement.
Yeah, Mapplethorpe isn't hanging on somebody's... I mean, they are.
Exactly. Mapplethorpe is a perfect example.
Right. Not necessarily... I don't know that Mapplethorpe exists without galleries and without museums. I mean, like I can go and enjoy the show, but I don't know that I want it on the wall.
Right. And Mapplethorpe was famous.
Right.
So there's like this thing that has to happen. And a lot of times it happens after you're dead. If you're doing something that's not generally acceptable, that's not popular on Instagram, for instance.
Well, our conversation that we had at the end of last season with Ethlone Clark, his controversial themes related to like lynchings, for example, he creates separate bodies of work, some for out on the road, which, you know, doesn't offend, is a little more palatable. And then he's got the more controversial work that he can have for galleries and shows in those venues. It kind of sounds like you're delineating different bodies of work for different venues or avenues to show.
What I'm trying to do is actually jump horses.
Okay.
You know, on the road, I started to develop this really unique style. And for a while, it was really helping me make sales, right? I was becoming more and more charismatic and more masculine, really, kind of defining this unique masculine style. However, once the radical realignment happened and I started doing drag a lot, pretty soon after, I started to kind of combine things from male and female and realized I was non-binary. And that's not palatable to most people. It's affected my sales massively. And so I have to walk this weird line of how authentic can I be. So it's a major handicap to go from like taking a superpower and turning into like a super disaster. And so I'm trying to figure out how to make this leap. Now, you guys know the touring world, we have to apply so far in advance. So it's like a huge oil tanker, right?
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to be able to pull it off by this past Basel. And so I stopped applying to shows. And then I had a bad show as my last show. And so now I'm in a hole.
Oh, man.
And the thing is, like, the new work in my lifestyle takes a lot of time. And so it's really difficult right now to figure out how am I got to reboot the touring thing because that's how I pay for the bills. And I've got to figure out how to do that inauthentically because I have to make sales while also trying to become famous, which is the only way I can see to make the new work. And also having this lifestyle, which also keeps a lot of people alive. So it's a lot right now.
Those are lofty goals, for sure. It's not just about sustenance, making enough money to live on.
Right.
You know, it sounds to me like your goals go far beyond that, which is saving people's lives. I mean, that's a pretty big deal, all while trying to be authentic and discovering yourself. So that does sound like a pretty big chunk to be all dealing with at once.
It is. And the other thing, like, I don't know if you guys are aware, but take a guess what the suicide rate is among trans people.
I'm glad you're bringing this up because, you know, I'm sorry, I'm answering your question by not answering it, but I'm glad you're bringing this up because I know we have listeners out there who are like, what is Cammy doing saving lives? How is this saving lives?
Right.
And this is exactly where it is. And there's a whole generation coming up that is a lot more fluid, and that a lot of the folks out there don't necessarily understand. I see it in my 13-year-old kid. All of their friends are kind of changing their names, and it's a very fluid thing.
Yeah.
My kids too, though. They'll talk to me about friends that they knew from grade school, and they will have different names and different pronouns and that too. I believe the younger generation is on board with this. And I think it's us folks that need to get, us older folks that need to get with the program and figure this out, because it's important.
Here's the thing, is that there's a genocide happening right now to trans people. And there may not be trans people left by the time that politicians are, since in the laws are more aligned with how young people feel. It's a wipeout right now. That's shocking. What my body of work is about. That's the point of the new work, is like a wake-up call. So it's meant to be visually disturbing, visually engaging. There's also a tremendous amount of joy from these performers, which doesn't make sense because many of them have been thrown away by their family. I mean, imagine you're an adolescent, so it's already hard. But then you're starting to question your identity. Like, who even am I? You had your parents your whole life. You would never conceive of them not loving you. So imagine they then throw you out on the lawn.
Right.
And that's it. You just lost your whole family. You're 13 or 15 or whatever. What are you going to do? You've never had to feed yourself. Now you're 15, you're homeless, you have no money. So you're going to go into sex work. I mean, there's nothing else you can do.
Yeah.
How's a 15-year-old going to make money? Okay, so then take this person, fast forward, now they're 21. Their life is hard. One of the ways that they get relief and have a fun thing to do is they've gotten involved with drag. You can get a drag house where you join a house and they teach you how to do it, help you with your costumes, help you get performances, and then that becomes your family. Those are the people that I'm shooting. A lot of them.
Interesting.
Not everyone has been in sex work.
Sure.
But some of the people, yeah.
So what's a drag? Tell me, what's a drag house again? Like, is it kind of like a club, or is it like a, this is where people live?
No. So there'll be a drag queen normally. Now I want to be careful with that because that's my gender challenge, is that drag kings is a big thing. And one of the most talented drag performers I know is a drag king, King Vaughn's. Shout out here in Denver. So anyway, there'll be a royal, I'm going to call him a drag royal, to indicate king or queen, who's achieved some success. So here, the house is called All Night. There's a performer who hosts at Hamburger Mary's, which is a national chain. Everyone, if you want to just check out a drag show, that's a great way to go. It's not offensive. You can take your colleagues from work. It's really fun. And so there's someone called Betty Swallows. So this is their name. Drag names are all hilarious, okay?
Yeah.
So Betty Swallows hosts this event. They joined the House of All Night a long time ago. So Betty's full name now is Betty Swallows All Night.
Amazing.
Good person to know.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of how it works. Now, when she joins that house, it's like like an honor. And then a lot of benefits come with being a part of that House of All Night, where you're going to have access to being in shows and the resources of the house. And then also it's a community. So, you're going to see if they like each other, and if they bond, and then they become like family.
That's kind of like what the Billy Porter series, is that similar?
I don't know.
The Billy Porter series, Pose, I think it is.
Oh. Yeah, Pose. Yeah,
Pose?
Yeah. Yes. Pose. Well, so Pose is about ballroom.
Is this what you're describing?
It's similar. So
okay.
Ballroom is hard to explain, but basically it's like a runway, like a fashion runway, where you're being judged very, very harshly and intensely live with two people battling with epic music and like a live rap explaining what's going on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's incredible. If you ever get a chance to go to Ballroom, it's incredible. It's really hard to find unless you're like in New York or somewhere. It started out in the 70s as where almost everyone was a sex worker and really having a hard time. And it was basically what I was saying about drag, except it was ballroom. There's an incredible documentary called Paris is Burning that you can stream, which is incredible, from the 70s from New York. It explains how it all started. But yes, those are also houses. And that's where voguing came from.
So this is how people might find the family of choice versus the family that they're born into that might not be supportive.
Yeah, exactly. And Pose does a really good job, that show. I think it's on HBO. I'm not sure. But they do a good job of showing that, like homeless teens. I've been shooting drag for over a year now. I've taken 15,000 images in that body of work. And I've shot, I don't know, maybe 50 performances, something like that. I'm still at every show, well, not every show, but I'm still meeting new drag queens. And I'm in Denver, you know, I'm not in New York City. So there's just so many drag queens now. And so a lot of them are just, you know, from suburbia or whatever. You know, it's not everyone is thrown out of their family. But people are. And we should come back now to the suicide question.
Please.
Because that's where this started. And Will, you were giving us the world's longest answer, although I'm competitive on that front.
You know, I just wanted to know, like, okay, you know, it's almost like the old Seinfeld bit when, you know, Jerry's like, you're not saving lives, you're a pimple popper. You know, it's like, well, how are you saving lives? You know, it's like, okay, you're just dressing up in a dress and being fabulous.
And so what do you think the suicide rate might be?
Yes, thank you. I can't imagine.
It's up there, I'm sure.
So the numbers I've heard are like 40 to 50. I'm sure there's different ways to slice it. But if you imagine, like how many trans people do you know? You know me? Do you know another one?
I do.
If you know 2 trans people, there's a good chance one of them will be dead by suicide. So is it going to be me or the other person you know? You don't know. Right. So, and even for me, where I'm having this incredible life and it's super surreal and I get to help so many people and all these things are happening, it's still hard to be trans. It's just really hard.
That's an incredible point. I just find it really moving. I mean, is it me or is it the other person you know? You know, that's important to just repeat, I think.
And see, this comes back to like the pronouns, respecting pronouns. Yeah. I didn't pick the they, them thing.
Yeah.
Like that was a bad marketing decision. And so people want to get into that with me. Like, well, you know, and I didn't pick it.
Yeah.
But you don't need to be an asshole. Like there's a 50% chance I might die by suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't you just be nice?
It doesn't take much.
How about don't say anything?
Yeah.
Don't fucking say anything. Or if you're going to say something, then here's what you do. You say, if you recognize that, hey, this is a person who might be trans, do not say, oh, are you trans? Because a lot of people, they are a woman. They identify as a woman. And if you ask, that's dysmorphic. It takes them out of that. Instead, you can say, hey, my name's Will. I use he, him pronouns. What about you? Now there, right, that's a reason to stay alive, right? I'm assuming all these people hate me and want me to die. And a lot of people actually want me to die because of my identity. In fact, I drive all over the country like you do. Imagine if half the states, because this is reality, half the states I go to, technically I'm not allowed to use the bathroom.
Right.
That's like saying you don't have a right to exist. I mean, at its core.
And that's what the laws are saying now. And that's why there's a genocide happening, which is the importance of the new work and why I need to find a way to make it work. And that's why this super audacious thing of becoming famous just needs to be accomplished, because that's the only way I can think of to save all these lives that need to be saved. There's genocide fucking happening and we need to do something about it. And so I'm doing something about it. And so the path that I've constructed requires me to be famous. So I've got to figure that out.
I think across all marginalized groups, this happens when somebody stands up to tell you their experience and somebody who doesn't come from that experience wants to say, you don't have that experience. Everyone needs to shut up and listen to that person's experience and allow that to be the truth, not whether or not you can understand what that other person is going through. That's not important. What you think isn't important. What that person is experiencing, that's important, and that is true.
This is such an incredible point. The world is so fucked up now that most of us need to just put our head in the sand to survive. Like, you just can't take it all in. There's just so many awful things happening all the time that seem unsolvable. And so we just keep our blinders on to the part that we can handle just to get through the day. And we're busy, right? It's hard to be a full-time, like a touring artist like we are. If everyone would just be a little bit better of a human. And it starts with just be kind to strangers. Like, you have no idea. It's not just trans people. Like, you have no idea what's going on with people. Like, all of us deal with stuff that's hard. And you don't know the person you've encountered, what they're dealing with. So just give them the benefit of the doubt. They're human like you are. Let's just be better humans. That's my message, ultimately. And I think that's why it's resonating so much. Yeah, we can't fix these huge problems ourselves. But if you could just be kind, and Douglas could just be kind. I know that's a stretch with you too, but
he's kinder than me.
You know, like, right. Everyone could just be kind. That would be a massive improvement in the world.
It costs nothing.
Right.
It's really not that much effort. It
costs nothing. Yeah. That's such a great point. None of this costs anything. It's just you be a good human. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's all it costs.
Absolutely.
Be a good human.
Yeah. Be a good human.
So this is an incredible conversation right now. This is exactly what it's all about.
Yeah. Thank you for being on here and letting us kind of get this out there. And, and yeah, I'm thinking about like the kindness that you mentioned, even on it's not Zoom, but we're using a Zoom-like app. The fact that I didn't fill my pronouns in, and maybe that's disrespectful and that's not kind, and I'll do it next time. Typically, if I'm doing that, then maybe I'll write something smart-assed, just to make you laugh. And it's like, well, maybe that's picking fun at trans folks.
At the issue at its core.
Right.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I have been guilty of that, of like, I've heard people make jokes of, I identify as this, or, you know what I mean,
right.
as with a punchline. And that really demeans your experience.
100%. And when I I hear those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like those are knife cuts. And so it's really dysmorphic, and we should talk about what that means. But when I listen to a lot of podcasts, I'm sure you guys do too, right? Because we drive so much. It's kind of a godsend for us.
Yeah, totally.
And so there'll be a show that I feel so connected with the host, and then they'll do that, like some throwaway comment making fun of trans people. And it just cuts me so deeply, especially if they're people like you guys who are such incredible humans, where you care so much about and sharing stories and things, then it cuts more deeply. Do you
Definitely.
Yeah.
Where,
yeah. Have we done something? have I stepped on? Yeah. What have I? Oh God! Rewind the tape.
Well, good news. I had ChatGPT analyze everything you've ever said. And
okay.
I've got a list.
Well, let me ask, for those people who aren't as understanding of this issue, this is the thing that has come to mind for me when this came across my awareness. And that is, people really struggle with the idea of gender and anatomy, and they get hung up on that, as opposed to gender being assigned in your brain, not by other parts of your body.
Right.
I mean, is that where people should put their emphasis on, is the aspect of our brains that tell us who we are?
Well, let me split that up a little bit. If you learn that someone's trans, your first curiosity is what's between their legs.
It's not mine, but I know that that's the trope.
But and actually, if you saw that piece I sent called Grabbed, Grabbed is about that.
Okay.
That's the one where the only thing that's really clear is what looks like a hot pink clitoris.
Okay.
Okay. And so it's really relevant. And it also has hands, what looks like these huge abstract hands all over the body of this person.
I love the new collection. There's something about it that is, and I think it's really, I was on a plane, you're sitting next to a stranger or whatever, and, I had gotten the images and I'm flipping through, and my immediate reaction was to take the phone and be like, oh shit. And there's
Cover
really,
that up.
Yeah, totally.
And I covered it up, like, like I shouldn't be looking at it. But at the same time, they are abstract, but there still is, you've done a really nice job of capturing the sexuality of the pieces without them being overt or being pornographic or
for sure.
They just feel sexual if you look at, or if you just glance at them.
They are sexual.
Yeah.
And a large part of this is sexual. Like, it's about sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And gender is related to sex. I mean, we're in an over-sexualized society. I'm not an expert in psychology or any of that stuff. I don't want to pretend I am, but it always blew my mind that the political scandals about like homophobia and queer stuff are always with people who are the most adamantly against those things.
Right.
Like the Republican, old, white, cis male person is having sex in airports in bathroom stalls. I don't even know how you can have sex underneath the fucking bathroom stall if you're 18, let alone 75, right?
Right.
So there's this insane thing where the people who are actually maybe denying who they are have the most hatred. It triggers the strongest reaction. And so there's a picture I sent you called the apple that's just all skin. It's this super beautiful woman.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look closely, you can see an Adam's apple. And so this is a really important piece. And I looked at this with a mentor of mine who's a cis male. And they had to go through that whole process of, wow, this is hot. I'm really attracted to this person. And then slowly come up to speed. Wait a second, this is someone who was born male.
Yeah.
And how can I feel attracted to them? What does that mean about me? And that's a whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And this is what needs to happen. People need to kind of go through those things and process it. And, the other thing too is like, and this is the problem with the discourse in the country, is it's enabled people to just be total inhuman, like not to act like human beings towards
That's
people.
True.
Where like, oh, I'm trans. Okay, different category now. You can just say things and think about me in ways that you would never about a normal person. And it's a lot like the way the Nazis were with Jews. It's a lot like that. And there's a genocide happening against trans people too. The other thing though too is that I now view being trans as actually a superpower, where it's like a superhero. Like I don't look down on trans people. I actually look up to trans people. I think they're some of the most incredible humans on the face of the earth as trans people. And so imagine you're a teenager, right, dealing with just that, because that's so fucking hard. And then you decide to question exactly who the fuck you are, all the way to the point of what gender you are. Who does that? Like, what kind of bravery is that? And then, even though there might be a law against being who you are and mass shootings all the time against those people, you decide to tell everyone who might discard you, including your family, who that person is. Who does that? This is superhero level shit.
Yeah. I saw an interview with Chaz Bono, and they said their mother didn't even get the whole trans thing for them. And it was like,
of course.
It's like, Mom, you are an LGBTQ icon. And even you, I mean, even Cher had trouble with that. So that is something that...
If Cher doesn't get it, what hope do the rest of us have?
100%. Right. Which is why it's so hard to be trans. Is even people who have the best intentions, aren't able to kind of make you feel good.
Yeah.
Or accidentally make you feel bad all the time.
Yeah, but it's like you said earlier, it's the 1,000 little cuts, and that's where the kindness comes in. I'm going to be honest about the kindness too, and just be like, hey, I'm going to fuck up because this is my life all the way up to this point, and I didn't know before.
Exactly, and that's what I do. I fuck it up all the time.
Yeah,
I was just having coffee with two trans people, and I misgendered them continuously in the conversation. And here I am, like, that's my life's purpose, right? Is to save trans lives, and I was hurting their feelings.
Okay.
And so one of them in particular, I kept saying she when they're non-binary. So yeah, and we all left feeling badly about it, and I haven't talked to them since. So yeah, you shouldn't feel bad. Well, and like, if life is hard for everyone, just being human is hard.
And then
you add all these things on top of that make it harder. Like being a touring artist is really hard.
It is. It is.
So this reminds me of this thing that kind of maybe explains why it's so hard to be authentic, like this challenge of whether I should be authentic or not. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine. Most of my friends are nationally touring artists, so I just run into around the corner at every show.
Yeah.
And one of my closest friends, he's really understanding and amazing and supportive of this whole thing. But he's like, why don't you just, during the show, just like do what you have to do to make the sales. Like, if you have to dress a certain way or say certain things, that's how we make a living. Just do that. And the reason that's hard is because we're talking about life and death. And so, like, I want to keep every trans person alive, not just like a certain number of them or whatever. And that's a higher goal, right, than other things, is that every time that I'm authentic, I get like 10x reward. And so one of the things, especially as a trans person, I was telling you, like, if you listen to media, you feel like everyone's out to get you. But I am always amazed at how many people actually are touched by this issue and actually are inspired by me being authentic. It doesn't just affect this thing, right? Like, maybe you're closeted or something else. Maybe you're working on a new body of work and you're kind of scared of showing it to people. There's many different ways to be authentic. Or maybe you're in a marriage that's not working, whatever it is, right? Or maybe whatever it is. And so me being authentic as a human being, we can connect on that level, and you can kind of draw inspiration from it. And so when you meet me at setup, especially, and that's when you're describing me.
Yeah.
That's when I can be super authentic without affecting sales. And it's still scary because this is a dirty secret, which you guys have probably talked about, but shows and jurying and all that, there is no perfect process.
Right.
So we know that the relationship with the director of a show matters. And that was one of the scariest things for me. It's my livelihood. And what if the director sees that I'm trans and half people hate that and I can't get in the show again? What am I going to do? If I can't get in my shows,
right,
then I can't make a living. But that's when I'm so blown away, is when I'm authentic on setup days. Then anyone who has a trans person that they really care about, like a child, family member, whatever, they come up to me. And then I hear these stories, and it helps them to see that I'm authentic. I'm able to be authentic. It gives them hope for their kid. And so actually, That Ann Arbor show was actually really incredible this past year. I have a lot of stories about it, but one of them was as a result of that. I don't want to out people, but there was someone I have to set up early if I can, because I have a 2-day setup.
Yeah.
When most of like a 4-hour setup, which I know pisses off artists, but whatever. You do you, boo.
Yeah.
Right. You can set up my double booth with 4 8-foot pieces, 14 feet high, in less time than great. Come on over and help. But it takes me 2 days. And so I have to try to beg, borrow, steal permission to start a little early. And so a little nervous about asking for a favor and being super femme. Because when I'm driving, I have to go to truck stops. I can't be femme and make it out alive, basically.
Right.
So I go more punk because I'm also punk. I go very punk when I'm driving.
That's interesting.
When we're driving across the whole country, right? I mean, I have to go to Love's truck stops. That's my solution to being safe. What if I'm presenting mask all the time?
Mm-hmm.
Because anyway, that's a whole discussion, is how dangerous what we do is. But so I was really apprehensive, but I was like, well, I've been driving, and it was a long trip. That's like a 15-day trip or something, because a couple shows all over the country. And so I was like, this is my only chance to be femme. I'm going super femme regardless, even though I'm scared. And the person I was meeting from the show to let me in early and get me set up behind the barriers and stuff, they're like, oh, I have a trans son who I think would really be inspired. Would be okay if I bring them by during the show. So I'm coming at it from a scared perspective. I might lose this relationship. Mm. And instead, I got an opportunity to help a young person who they have a much higher chance of not making it. So it was this huge thing. And not only that, it was so affirming and rewarding. And so anyway, they brought, I'll just use a different name maybe, because this is a nationally listened to show.
Sure.
But let's say Sam. They brought Sam by the booth. And when they came in, Sam, they're autistic, they have ADHD, and they're trans mask, meaning that they were born female, which would be AF, AB, AFAB, assigned female at birth, mm-hmm. but they identify as male. And in their adolescent, in school, imagine how hard it is. They're about 15.
It's a lot to deal with.
Exactly. Like just being a teenager is hard. Every joint in their body is bent to take up less space. Mm-hmm. So they come in my booth and they're just like taking as little space as possible. And I'd already been having these weird experiences I was telling you about earlier, where I would talk to people for 5 minutes, it would change their life, which is weird, but it just is what I experience as I go out in the world. And so I was thinking, boy, I've never really wanted to help anyone more than Sam. And so I kind of paused for a minute and just kind of was thinking about how much I wanted to help Sam. And I might start crying. So I looked up at Sam and I was like, say, you and I, we have a superpower together. Mm-hmm. And this was so perfect because teenagers, are in superhero movies. And I was like, if we had a superpower where we could bend metal with our eyes, then no one would know unless they saw us do it. You and I, we have a different kind of superpower that everyone can see. And our superpower is that we choose to live our lives without fear. And so that makes a lot of people really angry because they live their life in fear and they want us to also. But I meet a lot of people as I travel over the country. And out of all of those thousands and thousands of people that I meet, the most impressive people that I meet are trans people who grow into their superpower. So, Sam, I can't wait to see what you do with your superpower. And Sam marched out of my booth with their shoulders back, perfectly ramrod straight to go do something with their superpower.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
Right?
Yeah. And
right.
What a responsibility too. Like that's that you have as far as, it's,
the opportunity cost. Like if I focus on myself and making money and just dress up however I need to dress to make the sales, how many people am I missing like that?
Right.
Maybe that person's not alive today. Mm-hmm. Right?
People are called role models for a reason. As we're growing and developing, we need to look to somebody who we want to emulate, who resonates inside.
Right, a path.
Yeah, and if you hide you, then you don't show the path for somebody else that, that's a path that's authentic for me too. So that is, it's when you say saving lives, It's not just in your work, which I know your work is going to do that on a large scale. Just on a day-to-day basis, you make that opportunity for people.
This has been such an amazing talk, and it's an important talk. So many of the different things that you've said, like I have said as far as just talking to children, but yours is like, I feel like no good can ever come from discouraging a child in the arts. And your responsibility is so much bigger when you meet somebody who is challenged with their own identity and they don't know where to take it. You know, all of our responsibility is just to be kind. It's so goddamn easy for us as allies. That should be that maybe we can just be a little kinder going forward. And I cannot thank you enough from the bottom of my heart for coming on and sharing your story and your path, just a little bit of it, because I feel like we barely got a glimpse. And I think you're going to get a lot of people coming in and talking to you this year. So apologies in advance for all the extra people that want to talk to you going forward. But you're an amazing human. Stay alive. We love you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cammy. This has been a really meaningful talk.
Wow. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. I do run on hugs. So if any artists on the trail see me, I'm always up for a hug.
Awesome.
Also, if anyone's able to follow my Instagram, it's very fun. Cammy Rahore, CammyRahore. I am trying to spread that visual virus of love and understanding. And so occasionally, if I post a picture of the drag work, it'll say, help me spread the virus. If you can share it to your story, that's kind of how the virus spreads.
And we'll drop that link in the episode notes so you can find it easier. So there you go.
Fabulous.
Perfect.
Wow.
Well, all the best to you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you on the road.
Can't wait to see you. We'll see you in La Quinta or no?
Yeah, 100%. I expect a hug.
Absolutely. You'll get one.
All right.
Perfect.
Thanks, guys.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, find us on social media and engage in these conversations.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.
Oh, and if you like the show, we'd love it if you would give us your 5-star rating and offer up your most creative review on your podcast streaming service. See you next time.